Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. How many times have so many of us who love classic film or who read great literature have heard those words, have read those words, imagined those words? That is the opening of Daphne Du Maurier's famed, award-winning book, Rebecca. Written in 1938 by 1940 Alfred Hitchcock, it turned it into an exciting, thrilling, terror-filled film starring Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier, and Judith Anderson, who would later become known as Dame Judith Anderson. There have been various incarnations of Rebecca over the years, but now Netflix is delivering us a new version. I had extreme trepidation about a remake of Hitchcock's classic film, but I have to say, this version, directed by Ben Wheatley, more than stands on its own merits, particularly when viewed in light of the source material, namely Du Maurier's book. This is the story of a whirlwind romance of a young woman in Monte Carlo with a handsome widower, Maxim de Winter. They fall in love, they get married, and they go home to his estate of Manderley. Well, as I'm sure you can figure out if you don't already know the story, things take a less than pleasant turn once the new Mrs. De Winter arrives, because there, in every fabric and piece of furniture and fiber of Manderley, is the very essence of Maxim's dead wife, Rebecca, who is continually brought to life by the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers. Stepping in this time in the place of Fontaine, Olivier, and Anderson are Armie Hammer as Maxim de Winter, Lily James as the new Mrs. De Winter, Kristen Scott Thomas with an award-worthy performance as Mrs. Danvers, and Sam Riley takes on the very interesting role of Jack Favell, who was a dear friend of the now deceased Rebecca, but who somehow still wants to insinuate himself into the De Winter household. Lots of great twists and turns, but what really sets this 2020 version apart from Hitchcock's version, number one, this is one time where color truly is king. Those of you that know me and have been reading my reviews and following interviews for the past 3+ decades know what a fan and devotee I am of black and white storytelling. The shades of gray that great cinematography can bring out speak volumes as to a film and a story and tone and character. Here, you can see and feel a distinct difference between Hitchcock's 1940 version and Wheatley's 2020 version because of color. For more than just color, but color being one of the big factors. And where that really comes into play is with costume design. And the costume design here is done by none other than the spectacular and wonderful Julian Day. It has become a ritual for Julian and I to at least once every year talk about a film and his costume design. The past couple years, his costumes have been sensational with Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man. Dressing Freddie Mercury and Elton John, it doesn't get much better than that in terms of where you can go and the sky's the limit. But here, we get to see a very tailored back Julian Day with his designs. And these designs are key in elevating this version of Rebecca and in defining moments, tone, and character. The film, as you'll hear Julian and I talk about in this exclusive interview, gold plays a big part in the color construct of Rebecca. We open and we meet Maxim de Winter for the first time wearing a trendy fashion statement very cool looking gold suit, which he also wears at other times in the film. By the end of the film, we see Mrs. De Winter now in a Chanel-inspired gold tweed suit. Only one other time in the film do we see gold within wardrobe, and that is a gold chiffon scarf that Mrs. Danvers is wearing at one key point in the film. We go through fabrications of linens and natural fabrics and some chiffons, and prints come into play in defining the tone and where she fits into the world within her self-esteem as to Mrs. De Winter. Very defining is also one particular look that resembles a watercolor moire wallpaper in Rebecca's room that Julian has translated into a sweater for Mrs. De Winter, so she disappears, is swallowed up by the memory of Rebecca. It also mirrors the crashing of the waves in the surf right on the coast where Manderley sits. So there's so many costume elements that are brought to life and tell so much of this story. And Julian does such an amazing job with each and every one. So take a listen as Julian Day takes us back to Manderley with his costume design for Lily James, Armie Hammer, Sam Riley, and Kristen Scott Thomas. I sincerely hope that Netflix is planning an awards campaign for Julian's work in this film, because it is magnificent. Hello, Julian.
Hi, Debbie. How you doing?
I am so excited for our annual phone call.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. I am in love with what you have done with Rebecca. Timeless, classic, stunning, as I expected. What you bring definitely rivals what Irene did in Hitchcock's film.
Well, that's an incredible compliment. I'm not sure if it's 100% correct, but I'm very happy that you make me feel very happy and very proud.
What you do with the structure and the lines of the costumes, of the fashion, to define the characters, and your use of color, that the use of the gold that we first meet Maxim wearing, and it takes us through to that stunning, it looks like a Chanel-inspired gold suit on Lily James at the coroner's inquest at the end of the film. And then just a hint of that chiffon gold scarf on Danvers' neck as she's ready to plunge off the cliff. That color that takes us on that roller coaster of power is so beautifully done. Your fabrications in between, the tiny floral chintz prints on Lily James, that little bit of eyelet that we see peeking in some blouses, all is so defining, Julian. Where did you even start with this one? I mean, you may remember I am so big on the fabrications that you use. And
I do remember, and I love talking to you because, as I always say, you have such an incredible knowledge of clothing, of costumes, of everything, fabrics, detail. It's always such a pleasure talking to you because you have such an insight that so many people just don't really understand. So, I always feel very much on I have to make sure that I give you the best answers because you really know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, thank you, Julian. But take me through this, because it is watching the costumes define moments, define the characters. And I have to say, the tonal shift that comes at the 50-minute mark of the film when you put Lily in that beautiful undulating bluish gray sweater that matches the moire wallpaper. It also matches the colors of the surf and the sea, the violence of the surf at that particular cliff site where Manderley is. That is a whole shift in the tone, an icy shift, and it dazzles. So take me through your genius here, Julian.
I always make sense. I just don't feel I need to even say anything because literally I think you could write the article for me because you're far more eloquent than me and you probably know more about it than me. It always astonishes me that your insightfulness. But I think the thing about Lily's characters, I wanted to create her arc from the beginning where she's sort of this dowdy lady's maid and in a hand-me-down brown suit where even though Lily looks quite good in it, going into this sort of those beautiful sort of romantic silhouette where she falls in love with Maxim and they have this whirlwind romance in the south of France, in the heat and dust of Cannes and Nice. And then we get sucked back into Manderley where they try to bring back the sort of the elegance of the south of France to Manderley. But Maxim gets sucked back straight into it. This house which is sort of undulating and sort of alive. It's to me, Manderley is a character within the film itself, and I think that and then we sort of get drawn further into the house to the sort of the beating heart of the house, which is Rebecca's old room, where sort of it's been closed up even for however long, and sort of it pulsates and draws Lily's character further into that. And I think talking to Sarah, the production designer, I had a choice at that point. Either I could go, okay, I'm going to put Lily in something that is completely against type, against what the background is. I could have put her in a yellow sweater or a red sweater or an orange sweater or something that's really incongruous. But I felt that what I wanted to achieve was the idea that she was drawn into this room. She was sucked in by the sort of memory and the ghost of Rebecca. And as rightly you said, and you've picked up on this and nobody else has really picked up on, it actually mirrors the coastline of where we're filming and the undulating waves, the crashing waves that create the sort of drama and violence that appears in the film. So as I say, I don't really need to do much talking because you have understood my work so eloquently and so easily. But that's really it. I mean, it's simple, but I think, as you point out, effective.
Oh, so effective. And I love how you repurpose that sweater, and then we see her in say the next day in a scene, and you have almost a Peter Pan collar beige blouse underneath the sweater. That it's kind of like she's trying to distinguish herself, be more of the house, more Danvers maybe, who is more approving. I love the repurposing of outfits, because even though now she's the lady of Manderley, she still gravitates towards the delicate little chintz prints, re-wearing outfits. It's not a new outfit every day. Same as Armie Hammer's Max. He wears the same suit. That gold suit at the beginning, boy, you got a lot of use out of that one.
I did, and I think that's the thing about it. I think that there are some films like let's say for instance Rocket Man, where it was a different outfit every single time you saw Elton. Mm-hmm. That was something that I wanted to do, but for this, I think it was about the idea of repurposing was very important. Because there's a sense of realism about this film. It's a gothic horror, and it's not necessarily about the outfits. The outfits are important in themselves, but they don't. I wanted to create these characters and define them by what they wore. So I think the reuse, and in reality, even though Maxim is the suit is a sort of a reflection of his freedom from being at Manderley, because he immediately gets back into his Manderley clothes straight away as he gets back. But this suit in the south of France is bright, it's like the sun, it's a reflection of the sort of a golden statue that sort of Lily sees as her prize. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I think, he's great to dress. And, I think so repurposing was very important. Not so it's so often, but, just the idea that, they didn't have lots of clothes as well. So there's a sense of reality brought into the film. And I think, you'll see an outfit in one scene that works for it and then works against the scene in a different outfit. So very much like that. I think that the dress where she wears after the ball, where she comes down in the I described it the sad dress, that works indoors. It works on the seafront. It works in so many different ways. And again, we see that quite a lot throughout the film. So it's important to me, and especially I think for this film, to reuse and repurpose outfits that represent certain things at certain times and different things at other times.
Well, the ball, the dress, the pale, let me disappear into the crowd dress that she puts on after the spectacle with the red velvet. Got your own Scarlett O'Hara moment here, Julian. I was very excited. You got your own red velvet Scarlett O'Hara moment here. I thought it was so perfect because you also lengthened the sleeves on that so that it almost looked like the dress was too big for her. And she was being swallowed up by the dress while she's being swallowed up by the hubbub in the room and everything that's happening. And I thought it was so effective because she did almost disappear in the scene. And while you use a lot of tiny little prints with her, it was print, but it's barely discernible. It's not as lifelike as some of the other print fabrics that you used. I just love that. I love that contrast.
Well, actually, that dress I had printed myself. I designed the fabric and had it printed up in the south of England because it was just so important for exactly the reasons you described, that she is swallowed up by the party and it's less distinctive. Those ditzy prints that she wears all the time, they're sort of very much about her. But at this point, she's feeling, totally crestfallen and her life is sort of, in a sense, destroyed by Danvers. And so sort of being in this dress is so important to her. But yes, again, you've literally hit the nail on the head.
What fabrics were you using here? Because I'm picking up, I saw linen, some beautiful linens. I have to say the sky blue skirt that she's wearing at Manderley with the beige linen top, that outfit is just stunning. But I love the fact we can see the crispness of the linen. Whereas some of the other things, she's wearing some of the blouses that she has. You're going with that initially with that bow tie after she decides to open that top button once she meets Maxim. You then loosen her up with the bow tie blouse, that lavalier blouse look that obviously is like a chiffon or a very soft cotton sateen, so to get that fluidity. So I'm curious what fabrics you were using throughout.
Yes, I think fabrics are so important for this film. And, we start in the south of France where we have all those lovely flowing silks and lawns and cottons and linens. And it's a reflection of what we see. And then, obviously, as we come back into into England, we have those sort of heavy wools and heavy corduroys. And I think that, the outfit that you're talking about, the blue skirt with the check in it and then the crisp linen blouse it was almost a reflection of what Becca would have worn at that point. She was trying to ingratiate herself with Mrs. Danvers and that crisp formal look, the sort of almost London look as opposed to the sort of country lady look. Well, it was a combination of both, the country lady look, but within the sort of crispness of London as well. So yeah, that actual fabric, if I remember rightly, I found that in France, and that's an original vintage 1930s wool.
I mean, I'm just looking at some of the fabrics, and I have to see the film again on a much larger screen just to really appreciate. I mean, even some of the dresses with the tiny little 1/8 inch eyelet trim you have around the scoop neck, the delicacy, it tells us so much, and it looks pretty. That it's pretty isn't a word we can use that often with costumes, but some of these dresses on Lily, they're pretty. It fits her, the waifish nature that she is at the beginning of the film. And I just fell in love, just drooling through the progression of design and the emotional ride it took us on. Talk to me about Kristen Scott Thomas. I know you've dressed her before, but as Danvers in that suit, and you went with the blues. You went with shades of blue and aubergine as opposed to jet black.
Yes.
But you went with the shades of blue, deep navies, deep blue, and aubergine for a little bit of difference, but you didn't go with black. And I'm curious, and it looks like you almost made the suit maybe a half a size too small to really build up her gruffness and her hard edges.
Well, exactly. I mean, as you say, I have dressed Kristen before, and it was made from I sort of fitted about 10 different suits on her, and then we took elements from each of those suits, like a sleeve shape from one, a collar shape from another, and a skirt shape from another. And it was sort of, building up all the best elements. And I always saw her character as being sort of quite dominatrix, quite domineering, and quite sort of sexual in a way as well. And, there was an interesting relationship between her and Maxim, and I think there was an interesting relationship between her and Danvers, between her and Rebecca. And there's a sort of a repressed, you almost feel she never got married. She doesn't have any relatives. She just lives for Rebecca and lives for Manderley. And there's a sort of repression within that. And I think that's the idea of the suit being tight and constricted and repressive and sort of, but at the same time being sort of corseted and sort of like a dominatrix in terms of sort of, something's trying to burst out of her. And again, the blouses, the different colours that are representation of the bruise and how it develops over time. So yeah, I mean, it was a very strict, severe. She's like a sphinx when she first appears at Manderley, and there's almost the idea that she's like a Gorgon as well, like Medusa. That her stare would turn you to stone, and there's a great shot when Lily's walking along the corridor at night, and then we turn to see Mrs. Danvers, and it's just her eyes lit, and it's very much like the Medusa in Ray Harryhausen's
Yes.
film. Yeah, and it's like that sort of Sphinx-like character. So yeah, all of those things play into that character, and Kristen loved dressing like that, and she, because rather than using black, which is obvious, and also because the staff are in black, they're all in black, and I wanted to give her a uniform, but not a uniform that was staff. She is head of the household, therefore her suit represents the gap between the servants and the owners of the house. So she has a uniform, but it's not the black of the staff, really. Mm-hmm. That was really, very subtle, but, again, you pick up on that, which is great. So, yeah, that's really the feelings behind her look.
I love the fact that you have the high neck blouse with the pointed collar, with the very stark pointed lapels on the suit jacket. And I'm going to ask you a dumb question here, Julian, but were you using collar stays or heavy interfacing on those blouse collars on Danvers to make them have the sharpness that they had?
No, you know what? We didn't use anything. It was just the people that remade those blouses are some of the most incredible craftsmen you could ever find. There was this one lady that made them at one of my makers, and she spent she hand sewed everything. Everything you see on there is hand sewed, and because that fabric was so delicate, you had to hand sew it. I mean, she took such a long time. I mean, she was exhausted by the time she finished doing it. But every one of those blouses are with minute detail.
Wow. I have to ask you, Julian, about dressing Sam Riley as Jack Favell. Wow. What a look.
Well, I mean, I've dressed Sam before on quite a few occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Very different in all occasions. But Sam Riley is like a peacock. He loves to dress up. He loves clothing. It's one of his favourite things to do, to come to a fitting. And Jack is a rogue. He's a cad. He's the complete opposite of Maxim, really. He's a city boy, and I wanted to sort of give the impression. He wears sports coats and chinos and brogues, and very roguish character. He arrives in a flash, up to date modern sports car. And, he has the driving coat on, and just very roguish. I just wanted, Lilly's character, the first time she sees him, to be completely sort of wowed by him, and sort of the idea that it's the complete opposite of what Maxim is, even though obviously she's totally in love with Maxim, but there's sort of that idea of his relationship with Rebecca, and so there's a lot going on in terms of his clothing and what we see, and obviously he does wear a suit for the court, but it's very, and I think what I wanted to do was Maxim is very much based in the sort of early to mid 30s, whereas Jack is sort of he's expressing the sort of modernity of the late 30s and what clothing was going to become, those sort of wider shoulders, those wider lapels, that sort of the pleated trouser, the wider bagginess on the thing. So he was very much espousing the sort of the new look of the 1940s, really, as opposed to Maxim, which was very stuck in the sort of early mid 30s, really.
And I have to say, when he makes his first entrance with the plaid jacket that you made for him, that plaid with the print silk cravat, the cravat screaming Karlie Grant, and I wasn't quite sure what the jacket was telling me, but it definitely looked like a man who was really trying to be the best of everything he had seen.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was very much sort of the Hollywood, everything about the sort of silver screen and the sort of aspirations of a different path that she could take, sort of, the future of fashion and what was going into that. So, yes.
I just everything, just stunning from beginning to end, Julian. And that gold suit that you put Lily in at the end, I want. I'm not big on suits, but I love that suit, that fabric that is just stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the fabric I got in France, the Chanel fabric. Again, it was just I didn't realise what I wanted it for, but I knew I'd use it somewhere along the line, and it just came in so handy at the end. It just worked so perfectly. It was like symmetry, really. But it's one of those things. I'll go around and I'll buy vintage pieces or I'll buy fabric, not knowing what they're going to be used for, but knowing that somewhere on the line that they will get used because of the what they represent. Maybe it's the weave of the fabric, maybe it's the colour, or maybe it's the weave and the colour. And I think that's what I do in my actual life. The way I decorate my house, it's not, I don't have a set idea. I just pick up pieces that I like, or whether it's my own fashion, it's just about I'm not saying that I'm incredibly fashionable or both houses, but I know what I like, and luckily most of the time it all fits together. So I'm sort of very blessed in that respect.
Well, everything in this film fits together, and as I said, your designs here and the storytelling through the costuming surpasses everything Irene did for Hitchcock in 1940. This is stunning. There's not a piece in this film that I don't want, depending on my mood.
Well, thank you very much. And you know what? It's always a genuine pleasure talking to you. And you know, it's like having a chat. It's definitely not an interview. It's like, you know, two old friends sitting around having a nice discussion about clothes and life. So as I say, it's always an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh, you are one of my greatest joys, Julian. You truly are. And I can't wait till we talk again.
Absolutely. Well, look, you stay safe, and I look forward to the next time we're going to speak.
You too. And same here. Thank you, Julian. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.